Hi, I'm Mark Prosser. I'm going to be one of your welding instructors now that you've entered Blackhawk Tech Welding Program. Number one thing in the shop is to be safe. So today we're going to talk about safety of a grinder. The grinder is the most used tool by a welder, and it's also the most dangerous tool in the shop. You're going to use them every day, and you need to know how to put these discs on and a couple things about these grinders to be safe. So the first thing is we never use a grinder without a guard. You always have to have a guard on. This is one of the biggest things that people get hurt with, is taking the grinder off the guard off the grinder. You always have to have the grinder on. Now we can move this guard around to grind in different positions with the grinder, but that's getting a little bit into grinder usage, and we're just going to focus on safety and how to run this thing. Most of the grinders you're going to buy have a plug on here, so what this does is this spins, and when we push that button it locks it. To take this off, we put our tool on here, we loosen this up, and this screws off. We pull it apart. Now a couple things about the discs. Number one, if we can get a close-up, if you see how this is coming apart like that, that's when these discs start getting dangerous and they need to be changed. They're not that expensive, and they're certainly not worth getting hurt over. So we have a new one here. You can see the difference in size. The most important thing with these discs though is to read the RPM rating. So this one's 13,300 RPM. I know that this grinder is 12,000 RPM. So what you can't do is put a disc on a grinder that is a lower RPM rating than the grinder. That's when they become dangerous and start flying apart, okay? When we put this new disc on here, this spacer has a shoulder on it, and we have to make sure that it's the right size disc for the shoulder. Now we put this one back on, and there's a shoulder also. And that goes, slides right on here, and what that's going to do is lock that disc in. I push my lock button, I turn it until it locks, and I tighten this thing up. You want to make sure and check that it's tight and that it's working good. A couple of the other discs I want to show you that you're going to use here. We're going to take this back off again, lock it, take it back off again. You're also going to use a wire wheel a lot. Now these things are really dangerous because these little wires fly off. This thing is rated for, I think, 13 or 14,000 RPM. If you slide this thing on, put this thing on here like this, and we put it on the shaft, that elbow always goes down first. And when you look at that, if you see this wire wheel is sticking outside of the guard, if it's higher than the guard, that's because when you put the wire wheel on, you have to remove the spacer. So everything comes off when you put the wire wheel on. Now when we put the wire wheel on, it's sitting down inside the guard. You got to have it sitting down inside the guard, okay? The other disc that you're going to use is a cutoff disc. It's very thin. It's used for cutting off metal, cutting through metal, and grinding in tight areas. The difference being, it's just really thin. These you really want to look over for the edges, for any cracks or any divots, because these are the most dangerous ones. These ones fly apart the easiest. So we put our spacer back on. This one has to fit on there nice and tight because all the grinders are different. Make sure that fits on there. And now this one, if we put the elbowed side down and we tighten it up, it doesn't grab the disc. So we have to make sure we flip this over so it's flat side down. Now it grabs the disc tight. Always check these things, make sure they're seated right, they're not wobbling away. And the last one I'm going to show you is a metal finishing disc, and this is called a flapper disc, and it's actually sandpaper, right? It's flaps of sandpaper. So this is for a lot smoother, a lot more intricate grinding. This thing's going to go on the same way as all of them. I put my spacer on. This one's fitting tight. I already checked. the RPM rating. And now I'm going to bring this one down on. Make sure it's tight. And tighten this thing up. And we're ready to go. It's sitting right, it's tight, it's got the guard on, we're ready to go. One other thing about these grinders that a lot of people don't realize is there's proper ways to use a grinder and non-proper ways to use a grinder. But one thing safety-wise that I want to talk about is how you grind on a piece of metal. There'll be another video about grinder usage in the near future. But right now, say for example, I have this sharp bevel, and this is very sharp metal, right? All grinders turn counterclockwise. So when I'm grinding on this bevel, I have to spin this disc off from the sharp edge. So I have this thing on an angle, and I'm spinning that disc counterclockwise, clockwise, off from the edge. If I angle it this way, I start spinning this disc into that sharp edge. If I turn it like this, and I spin this disc into that sharp edge, it will catch that sharp edge, and these can tear apart. That's when your grinders kick back. They can hit you in the face. They can jump out of your hands. They are a nasty little tool. These spend 12,000 RPMs. It's called inertia. If this thing catches, it will get loose on you. The number one rule when using a grinder is a face shield. Most face shields or most welding helmets have a grind mode in them, so you can use them for a face shield. Safety glasses are awesome. They protect your eyes. But nothing protects your face from that grinding disc like a face shield. So in here, our rule is you need to have safety glasses on and you need to have some sort of a face shield before you use this grinder. Again, number one tool you're going to use in here. We have 150-ton presses. We have shears that cut through thick metal, no problem. This is the most dangerous tool, and most of the injuries happen with a grinder. Be careful with your grinder. Make sure your rating of your disc are bigger than the grinder. Make sure everything's tight, and most importantly, if you have any questions, come see one of your instructors. We'll catch you in the shop soon.